43 years ago, Fleetwood Mac released the song Tusk. They did it as a public service. This was a song with a message, an educational song. This was 6 years before the music industry came together to raise awareness about African famine with We Are the World and Do They Know It's Christmas. And so in these early days, Fleetwood Mac released Tusk to raise awareness about something else, about the Bruins. It was the best way they knew to help inform the world that UCLA sucks. I suspect that most of you have heard the song and its very important message at USC football games. And I know some of you don't necessarily love the language, but it's a concept we're exploring here, so let's not get hung up on semantics. Because over the years, sometimes people come up to me and they say, Chris, is it true? Does UCLA really suck? This is an important question. Today, we're going to try to answer it. Now, most of you know by now that I strive to be fair and that I want Musings to be educational. I want people to leave this program more knowledgeable and better prepared for life than they were before. So I want to avoid some of the easy stuff. Look, it would be easy for us to sit here and just laugh at UCLA football, the court jester of major college football programs. We could talk about their proud tradition of jumping over the wall at practice. We could talk about stealing handicap spaces. We could talk about how silly it is to be the little brother to the Cal Bears. Same mascot, colors, fight song. Yeah, let's be just like those guys. But let's make one change. Let's get rid of the dark blue and go for powder blue, which of course may be the most effeminate uniform decision in college football history. I want you to imagine this. Imagine you're watching the first scene of Star Wars. The stormtroopers are shooting it up with the rebels. The Imperial March begins to play. And here comes Darth Vader, clad head to toe in baby blue. Can you even imagine what would happen? How the audience would respond? They start cracking up, obviously. How could you take him seriously in that color? Powder blue isn't for football uniforms. It's for matching his and her sweaters designed by Stuart Smalley. It's a uniform of choice for a guy who spends hours every day talking about toxic masculinity. It's for sorority hoodies, for pajamas with feet, for skirts. We could talk about all that, but we won't. We could talk about the fact that one of the most famous figures in UCLA football history, the author of UCLA football team slogan, punting is winning, basically looks like a physically less intimidating Ellen DeGeneres. Remember that pep rally where they celebrated Skippy's arrival and talked about how they were going to end LA's football monopoly? I do. Hilarious. This was shortly before the guy got beat 50-0 by Lane Kiffin. Shortly before Pete Carroll gave him what amounted to a wedgie in the Coliseum, when Pete had to run a play-action pass for a touchdown at the very end of a game, just to put Coach Ellen in his place for calling a stupid timeout. We could talk about that, because that's what UCLA football is about, equal parts hilarious and sad. But we're not going to, because I want to dig into the objective evidence, the numbers, the facts. I want to strip away the emotion, get rid of the subjectivity, and answer this question using hard evidence and logic. So let's start with the titles. USC, as most of you know, has 11 national championships. UCLA has never won an undisputed national title. It won half of one once 68 years ago during the Eisenhower administration, the year after Stalin died. Man still hadn't been to space. Most people had still never heard of Elvis. Most Americans would never have heard of the country Vietnam at that point. This was the same year color TV came out, which means it was the same year that most people in the country realized that UCLA wore baby blue uniforms. UCLA's half a national title was closer in time to the Spanish-American War than to the present day. What about Heisman's? USC has won 7 Heisman trophies. That's right, I said 7. Don't argue with me. UCLA has 1. You can make an argument that Gary Beeman was the worst Heisman winner of all time. The year Gary Beeman won his Heisman as a quarterback, he threw for 1,359 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 7 picks. That was his season. The quarterback for SMU last week threw 9 touchdowns in 1 game. That UCLA team that Gary Beeman was a part of tied Oregon State, lost to USC, and got absolutely steamrolled by Syracuse in the season finale. Heisman Trophy winner, Gary Beeman wasn't the best player in college football. He wasn't the best player in his own city. Rose Bowls, you say. UCLA plays its regular season home games in the Rose Bowl. USC owns the Rose Bowl. The Trojans are 25-8 in Rose Bowl games, a dominant mark compared with every other program. UCLA is 5-7 in Rose Bowl games and hasn't won a Rose Bowl game since 1986. I was in 7th grade at the time. To put that 5-win mark in comparison, not only have Michigan and Ohio State won more, not only has USC won 5 times more, but even Washington and Stanford have won more. In fact, Pete Carroll won 4 Rose Bowls in a span of only 6 years. And the only reason he didn't win 5 in that 6-year period and tie UCLA's entire output in just a few years is because Pete decided to take a year off, go to the Orange Bowl, and beat Oklahoma 1,000-19. That's the only reason. NFL draft picks, USC has 187 more NFL draft picks than the Bruins. The Trojans lead in first-round picks 83-36. They lead in number 1 overall picks 5-1. In fact, Lincoln Riley himself is beating UCLA in overall number 1 picks. He's had 2 in his 6 years compared to UCLA's 1. But maybe the problem here is that I'm focused on success and statistics about success. And maybe that's not fair to the Bruins. So listen to this. As all USC fans know, it has been a bitter struggle around here since Pete Carroll left. In fact, before Lincoln Riley arrived, it was downright depressing for more than a decade. Yet during that stretch of mediocrity for USC, from that time period from Pete Carroll leaving to Lincoln Riley arriving, the Trojans still won 20 more games than UCLA. Even when we're terrible, we're better than them. Look, those are the numbers, people. I don't think we need to hire a crew from MIT to analyze this. It turns out that, yes, based on the objective data, UCLA really does suck. Now, this leaves some important questions unanswered. For example, when did UCLA first begin to suck? And the answer appears to be immediately. UCLA's first football season was in 1919. They went 2-6, playing against, and this is a direct quote from Wikipedia, the greatest of all media organizations, a schedule full of local high schools and other assorted teams. That's right. UCLA went 2-6 playing against high school teams. So as you can see, UCLA didn't develop into UCLA. They were Bruins from day one. Why? Do we blame nature? Do we blame nurture? Do we blame the local high schools that were beating UCLA for not playing their backups more? I don't know. But what I do know is we can definitively answer the question that sometimes stumps wrong-headed USC fans. Who is our biggest rival? The answer, of course, at least when it comes to football, is Notre Dame. Obviously, geography favors UCLA. Most USC fans are surrounded by Bruins on a daily basis, whereas Notre Dame people are a lot more scarce, at least in Southern California. Unless you're visiting a prison or being targeted by a Ponzi scheme, you're unlikely to run into many donors. But this misses something very important. While geography might make UCLA the natural choice for biggest rival, the fact remains that Notre Dame is simply better and a far more worthy opponent the vast majority of the time. Notre Dame, not UCLA, is USC's true football peer. It's the Irish that have a storied football history. They're the ones that compete with USC in all these categories, first-round draft choices, Heismans, and all the rest. They're the ones that have 7 Heisman trophies like USC. That's right, it's still true, 7. They're the ones that have double-digit national titles like USC. And even now, in a period where Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State have been the elite programs, Notre Dame is still a solid program, a fixture in the top 10, and much more of a national player than the Bruins. But why is Notre Dame better? Truth be told, Notre Dame just cares more. UCLA has a history of underachieving in football because they choose it. It's kind of like their hobby. If the Bruins ran the Boy Scouts, the most important merit badge you could earn would be the merit badge for underachieving. UCLA is chronically unable to get it together because they just don't try very hard. This is what makes it ironic that UCLA fans have long called USC the University of Spoiled Children, because it's UCLA football that acts more like the spoiled son of a rich guy. I mean, you can see it, can't you? Bel Air address, got a new BMW when he turned 16, got a pretty good SAT score, but mediocre grades because he never did his homework. He knew all along he just mined all his rich dad's business contacts for job opportunities and clients. He's too lazy and unambitious to accomplish even a fraction of what he's capable of. He was born into all kinds of advantages, but he's content to hang around somewhere around the 30th or 40th percentile. It's not a complete failure, but he's far from a star. He's just not reliable. And he doesn't get much respect from the real achievers because they know he's a spoiled rich kid that didn't earn anything. Has chosen to throw away most of the opportunities that came his way. He just doesn't put in the effort. That is UCLA football. It's nothing to be proud of, kids. Notre Dame also hasn't won a national title in a long time, 34 years to be exact, which hurts the Irish. I love that. At the same time, I at least remember that title. The Irish have actually won a couple in my lifetime. As I noted earlier, it's been 68 years since UCLA's only undisputed title. Do you know what? That drought doesn't really bother UCLA fans in the slightest, which is a major difference between our football rivals. Notre Dame wants to be great, and they hurt because they're not right now. UCLA doesn't really care about being great, which is good for them because they so rarely are. And they really only care about beating USC occasionally. That's why they do embarrassing things like put up city champion signs on their practice field. City champions. USC would never do that. Do you think Alabama puts up state champions banners when they beat Auburn? It's embarrassing. Clownish even. John McKay had it right. There's nothing better than beating Notre Dame. There's nothing worse than losing to UCLA. And listen, losing to UCLA this year is a very real possibility. The Bruins are almost always dangerous in this rivalry game. The spoiled rich kid may be lazy, but he's capable of getting his act together on occasion, generally once a year. The most important thing to UCLA football is to beat USC. That's it. It's their oxygen. It's what they live for. It's what they crave. And that's why the Bruins are always dangerous in the rivalry game. It's just about the only time they play with some pride, the only time they act like they really care. This rivalry game is where you see what UCLA could be if they cared more than 1 week out of 52. It's when the rest of the country sees their potential, when we see from some guts from the gutties, when we see what it would be like if UCLA didn't choose to suck most of the time. And we're only a week and a half away, and I'm telling you, the Bruins will play well. I expect a dogfight. It kind of has to be a dogfight. UCLA can play offense, and right now, I'm not sure USC could hold the Sun Girls under 350 yards passing. I hope we get that fixed. So, in summary, does UCLA suck? Of course they do. There's no denying that. Fleetwood Mac wasn't lying to us. I just don't know that they'll suck on November 19th.